The silk of his tie felt like a weapon in my hands. It was a deep charcoal gray, the color of a storm cloud, and it whispered against my fingers as I tightened the knot. Mark stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on our reflection in the grand hallway mirror. To anyone watching, we were the perfect picture. The Vances, a portrait of power and elegance, ready to face another glittering charity gala. His jaw was tight, a tiny muscle twitched just below his eye. He was terrified of me. "Good. There," I murmured, my voice a soft caress. I smoothed the lapels of his custom tuxedo, my touch lingering for a beat longer than necessary. "Perfect." He didn't meet my eyes in the reflection. He couldn't. Instead, he stared at my hands, now resting on his chest. He saw them not as the hands that had once held him in the dead of night, but as the instruments of his ruin, the architects of this cold, quiet hell we now called our life. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. It was a combination I had grown to enjoy. "Thank you, Ellie," he said, his voice a strained whisper. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Anything for you, darling? We have to look our best tonight. After all, we have a reputation to maintain." The word reputation hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. He flinched, ever so slightly. That was my victory. Not in screaming matches or shattered plates, but in these tiny, silent surrenders. He had made a monster of me, and now he had to live with his creation. But that was now. This story begins 6 months earlier, on a Tuesday that was as painfully ordinary as any other. Before the tie became a weapon, it was just a piece of silk. Before our home became a battleground, it was a sanctuary. Or so I believed. Our house in Willow Creek, Connecticut, was a symphony of muted colors and clean lines, a modern masterpiece that Mark had designed himself. It was featured in magazines. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the carefully curated art on the walls, my only remaining connection to the woman I used to be. I was the curator of this perfect life, the silent manager of the Vance empire. My days were a quiet ballet of schedules and arrangements, of caterers and charities, of being the silent, steady hand that kept Mark's world spinning perfectly on its axis. That morning was no different. I woke at 6, the sky still a soft, bruised purple. I moved through the silent house, my bare feet making no sound on the polished oak floors. I prepared Mark's coffee, a dark roast from a specific estate in Colombia, ground just so. I laid out his gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and the blue tie he favored for important client meetings. Everything was in its place. I was in my place. Mark came downstairs an hour later, a force of nature wrapped in a tailored suit. He kissed the top of my head, a familiar, absent-minded gesture. "Morning, Elle. You're a lifesaver. I couldn't find this tie anywhere. It was right where it always is." "Mark," I said with a soft smile. "Right. Of course." He scanned a headline on his tablet. "Already a million miles away in the glass and steel towers of Manhattan. Big day. The preliminary pitch for the Atherton project. If we land this, it's a game changer. You'll be brilliant," I said. And I meant it. His brilliance was, in a way, my life's work. I had sacrificed my own career as a promising art curator at the Met to support his. I became his sounding board, his social planner, his secret weapon. It was a role I had accepted, a trade I had made for this beautiful, gilded cage. "Couldn't do it without you, Ellie," he said, grabbing the leather briefcase I held out for him. He was already halfway out the door. The words were a practice script, spoken so many times they had lost all meaning. He was a star, and I was the dark, quiet space that made him shine brighter. After he left, the house was filled with a profound silence. It was a silence I knew well. It was the sound of my life on hold. I walked through the living room, my fingers trailing over the spine of an art history book on the coffee table. I remember the thrill of discovering a new artist, the dust of archives on my hands, the passionate debates with colleagues. That person felt like a ghost now, a whisper from a different lifetime. Later that morning, I met my best friend, Lena, for coffee. Lena was a psychologist, and she had a way of looking at me that felt like she was reading the footnotes of my soul. She was sharp and direct, the complete opposite of my carefully constructed serenity. "He's pitching the Atherton project today?" she asked, stirring her latte with unnecessary vigor. I nodded, taking a delicate sip of my tea. "He's been working towards this for years." "He has," Lena emphasized. She put her spoon down with a clatter. Ellie, don't you ever miss it? The gallery. The city. Your work. I have a different kind of work now, I said. The familiar, well-worn defense rising to my lips. Managing the foundation. Our social commitments, it's a full-time job. Organizing fundraisers for rich people isn't the same as discovering the next Basquiat. And you know it. She countered, her dark eyes softening. I just worry about you. You've poured all of yourself into him. What's left for Eleanor? I didn't have an answer. The question made me uncomfortable. It pricked at a part of me I had long ago decided to ignore. The truth was, I didn't know who Eleanor was anymore. I was Mrs. Mark Vance. It was an identity that was respected, admired, even envied in our small, wealthy circle. But it was a borrowed identity. It wasn't mine. I'm happy. Lena. I lied. And the lie was so practiced it almost sounded like the truth. Are you? She asked quietly. I looked out the window of the little cafe, at the perfectly manicured hedges and the luxury cars gliding silently down the street. I saw women like me, dressed in elegant neutrals, their faces smooth and composed. We were the wives of Willow Creek, the keepers of perfect homes and perfect families. We were all playing a part. I just thought my performance was better than most. Mark is a good husband, I said, more to myself than to her. He's ambitious. He's charming. He loves me. Lena didn't argue. She just gave me that look again. The one that said she knew more than I was willing to admit. He's a star. Ellie, just make sure you don't get burned by the heat. I laughed it off, changing the subject to a new exhibit at the Whitney. But her words followed me home. What's left for Eleanor? That evening, Mark called from the city. He sounded euphoric. We killed it. I think Atherton is ours. We're all going out to celebrate. Don't wait up for me. That's wonderful news. Mark, I'm so proud of you, I said, my voice bright and supportive. Book us a reservation at Per Se for Saturday. The best table. We'll celebrate properly, he commanded, his voice already distant as he talked to someone else in the background. Of course. The line went dead. I stood in the silent kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear. He was celebrating. I was home. This was the arrangement. This was our life. I put his success before my own needs, my own dreams. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was a partnership. I told myself this was enough. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, a vast space of cool grays and soft whites. His suitcase for his today trip to Chicago the next morning was open on a bench. He packed it himself, a rare occurrence, saying he didn't want to bother me. I smiled at the thought. Even his attempts at thoughtfulness were centered around his own convenience. My job was to do the final check, to make sure he had the cufflinks that matched his watch, the extra collar stays, the presentation notes he always forgot. I ran my hand over the neatly folded shirts. I was about to close the suitcase when I noticed the side pocket of his suit jacket, the one he had worn today, was slightly bulging. Probably just receipts he'd forgotten to clear out. I reached inside, my fingers brushing against a small velvet box. It wasn't a ring box. It was long and slender. My heart gave a little flutter. Was it for me? A surprise to celebrate the Atherton pitch? A little thrill of anticipation ran through me, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing. He could be thoughtful. He did remember me. I pulled the box out. It was from Tiffany's. Classic. Elegant. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a diamond necklace. It was a delicate, modern Designus single, perfect diamond suspended on a platinum chain. It was stunning. It was exquisite. And it wasn't my style at all. A cold certainty washed over me, chilling me more than the autumn air outside. It wasn't just that the necklace was wrong for me. It was that it was so perfectly right for someone else. Someone younger, flashier, someone who would wear diamonds on a Tuesday just for the hell of it. My style was understated. Classic pearls, vintage gold, pieces with history. This was a statement of wealth, loud and new. My fingers, suddenly numb, fumbled in the side pocket again. They closed around a thin piece of paper. The receipt. I pulled it out, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was from 2 weeks ago. The name on the credit card was Mark Vance, and tucked into the fold was a gift receipt. For Ember. Ember. The name was unfamiliar, yet it felt like a stone dropping into the pit of my stomach. Ember. It sounded young. It sounded blonde. I slowly placed the necklace back in its box and tucked it, along with the receipt, deep into the pocket of his jacket, exactly as I had found it. I closed the suitcase. My movements were calm, deliberate, robotic. Inside, a storm was raging, but my body was an island of eerie stillness. I would not give him the satisfaction of a single tear. I went downstairs and poured myself a glass of water, my hand perfectly steady. I looked around at our perfect home, the art I had so carefully chosen, the furniture we had debated over, the life I had curated. It was all a lie, a beautifully constructed, tastefully decorated lie. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was non-existent. Who was Amber? A colleague? A client? My mind spun with possibilities, each one more venomous than the last. But I knew, deep down, in that silent, intuitive place I had learned to ignore, I knew exactly who she was. That night, sleep was a distant country I could not reach. I lay beside Mark's empty side of the bed, the space feeling like a gaping wound. At 2 a.m., I slipped out of bed and went to my office. It was a small, elegant room where I managed the foundation's affairs and our family finances. I sat in front of my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the darkness. Mark was a tech enthusiast. He loved the seamless integration of our lives through the cloud. Calendars, contacts, photos all synced. He'd set up a family sharing account years ago, convinced it was the epitome of modern efficiency. I rarely used it. I had my own life, my own schedule. Or so I told myself. My finger hovered over the photos icon. This felt like a violation, a point of no return. But he had already crossed the line. He had set fire to our life. I was just looking at the ashes. I clicked. There were the usual albums: Family Vacation, Italy 2022, Mark's 45th birthday, Foundation Gala, and then I saw it. An album titled Projects. It sounded innocuous, professional. My stomach twisted. It was the only album I didn't recognize. I opened it. The first photo was of a building schematic. I almost breathed a sigh of relief. But then I scrolled down. There she was, Amber. She was standing next to Mark on a construction site, laughing, her head tilted back. She was exactly as I had imagined. Young, probably late 20s, with sun-streaked blonde hair and a hungry ambition in her eyes. She was wearing a hard hat, but she made it look like a fashion accessory. I kept scrolling. The photos shifted from professional to personal. Mark and Amber having lunch at an outdoor cafe, his hand resting on hers across the table. Amber in a cocktail dress, Mark's arm wrapped tightly around her waist at a bar I didn't recognize. Her, looking at him with an adoration that was both sickening and familiar. It was the way I used to look at him. Then came the videos. Short clips. The sound of her laughter filling a hotel room. Mark's voice, lower and softer than I had heard it in years, calling her name. A video of them on a boat. The wind whipping through her hair as she kissed him. The diamond necklace I had found sparkling at her throat. The pain was physical. It was a white-hot knife twisting in my gut. Every memory I had of the past year was instantly rewritten. Tainted. Every late night at the office. Every business trip. Every distracted phone call. It all clicked into place. A mosaic of betrayal. I felt the air leave my lungs. A silent scream trapped in my chest. I watched everything. I memorized her face. The sound of her voice. The way my husband looked at her. I sat there until the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gray. The pain didn't go away, but something else rose to meet it. It was a cold, hard clarity. The grief was there, a solid, heavy thing inside me, but it was no longer in control. I closed the laptop. I walked to the bathroom and looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the faint lines around my eyes, the silver strands of my temples that I refused to dye. I saw 43 years of life, of choices, of sacrifices. I had given this man the best years of my life. I had built his world, polished his crown, and stood silently in his shadow. And he had thanked me by trying to replace me with a newer model. A messy, public divorce was what he would expect. It was what everyone would expect. The tearful, wronged wife. The cliché. We would fight over assets. Our friends would choose sides. And in the end, he would be free to start a new life with her. His reputation only slightly tarnished by the romantic scandal. I would be a tragic figure, pitied at cocktail parties. No, I would not be a victim in my own story. I would not divorce him. I would not scream at him. I would not give him the satisfaction of a fight. He had underestimated me for our entire marriage. He saw me as a decorative, useful object. He had no idea who I really was. He had forgotten the sharp, strategic mind of the woman who could spot a forgery from across a room and negotiate with the most ruthless art dealers in the world. He had mistaken my quiet support for weakness. It was time to remind him. I would not destroy our marriage. He had already done that. I would simply dismantle his life, piece by piece. And I would do it with a smile on my face, from right inside our perfect home. A few weeks later was the Willow Creek Art Foundation's annual fundraiser. It was my event. I had spent months planning every detail, from the floral arrangements to the Michelin-starred chef. It was the highlight of the town's social calendar, a night where status and wealth were on full display. I knew Mark would be there, and I knew he would bring her. He'd frame it as bringing a promising young designer from his firm. It was brazen, arrogant, and so typically Mark. One chose my dress with the precision of a general choosing his armor. It was a simple, elegant column of deep emerald silk that brought out the green in my eyes. I wore my grandmother's pearls. I was a picture of class and old money, a stark contrast to the new, glittering thing he now coveted. When they walked in, I was greeting the mayor. I saw them out of the corner of my eye. Mark, handsome and confident, and Amber, on his arm, wearing a tight, white dress that was perhaps a little too daring for the occasion. She radiated a nervous energy, a desperate desire to impress. She was scanning the room, sizing up the competition. Then her eyes met mine. I excused myself from the mayor and glided towards them, a serene smile fixed on my face. Mark, darling. I kissed his cheek, my eyes never leaving Amber's. You must be tired of me monopolizing all the important people. Go, mingle. I'll be fine. He looked relieved. Ellie, this is Amber Hayes, one of our most talented interior designers. She was instrumental on the new hotel project. Miss Hayes, I said, extending a hand. Her handshake was firm, her nails perfectly manicured. It's a pleasure. Mark has told me nothing about you. The subtle barb hit its mark. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. Eleanor, it's an honor. This event is stunning. You have amazing taste. She gushed, the compliment feeling more like a challenge. She was assessing me, my home, my life, the life she wanted. Thank you, I said, my smile never wavering. I find that true taste is about subtlety. Don't you? It's not about what you show off, but what you choose to hold back. We stood there for a moment, two lionesses circling each other under the glittering chandeliers. Later, I saw her holding court with the Athertons, the very clients Mark was trying so desperately to land. She was animated, laughing, a glass of champagne in one hand. She was trying to charm them, to prove her worth. My moment had come. I picked up a glass of deep, blood-red Bordeaux from a passing waiter's tray. I moved through the crowd with purpose. My path an elegant, calculated trajectory. I caught Mark's eye and gave him a little wave. He smiled back, oblivious. As I approached Amber's group, I feigned a small stumble on the edge of the Persian rug. It was a tiny, believable misstep. My arm lurched forward. The entire glass of red wine arced through the air and splashed directly down the front of Amber's pristine white dress. A collective gasp went through the small crowd. Amber looked down at her ruined dress in horror, the crimson stain spreading like a fatal wound. I brought my hand to my mouth, my eyes wide with perfectly feigned shock. Oh, my goodness. I am so dreadfully sorry. I rushed forward, dabbing at the stain with my cocktail napkin, only making it worse. How clumsy of me. That dress is absolutely beautiful. Or, well, it was. Mark rushed over, his face a mask of fury and embarrassment. Ellie, what the hell? It was an accident. Mark, I said, turning my most innocent, apologetic eyes on him. I looked back at Amber. Her face was pale with shock and humiliation. Her night was ruined. Her grand entrance into our world was a disaster. But as I met her gaze, I saw something else flicker in her eyes beyond the anger. It was suspicion. It was the dawning realization that this perfect, serene wife might not be so serene after all. She saw it. She knew. I smiled sweetly. Let me help you find the powder room, I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. The game had just begun. With a final, apologetic glance at the Athertons, I guided a seething Amber towards the ladies' lounge, my hand placed lightly on her back in a gesture of feigned support. The moment the ornate door closed behind us, Her composure shattered. You did that on purpose, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. She grabbed a handful of paper towels, furiously blotting at the stain that had now set deep into the fabric. I leaned against the marble vanity, crossing my arms and regarding her with a look of calm pity. Did I? Why on earth would I do that? That would be such a theatrical thing to do. I let the word theatrical hang in the air, a subtle jab at her own dramatic entrance into our lives. Don't play dumb with me, she snapped, throwing the stained towels into the bin. You know about us. My mask of innocence fell away, replaced by a cool, unreadable expression. I know that you are a very ambitious young woman, Ms. Hayes, and I know that you have attached yourself to my husband. These are facts. What you and he choose to call your arrangement is of little interest to me. She stared at me, baffled. This was not the reaction she had expected. She was prepared for tears, for accusations, for a screaming match. My utter lack of emotional display unnerved her. It was a language she didn't speak. So that's it? You're just going to let him cheat on you? She asked, a note of disbelief in her voice. Let him. I repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. You misunderstand the situation entirely. A marriage like ours is a complex entity. It's a business, a brand. The Vance brand. It's not something you throw away over a simple indiscretion. I looked her up and down, my gaze lingering for a moment on the ruined dress, especially not a temporary one. Her face hardened. I'm not temporary. I gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. Everyone thinks that at first. You feel special. He tells you everything I don't understand about him. He tells you that you make him feel alive. It's a very compelling story. But it's an old one. And it always ends the same way. I pushed myself off the vanity and walked towards the door. I paused with my hand on the brass handle. A piece of advice. From one woman to another. I said, my voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Mark likes winners. He's attracted to success. Looking like a clumsy, wine-stained mess in front of his most important potential clients is not a good look for you. It makes you look weak. It makes him look bad. And Mark hates looking bad. I left her there, standing amidst the ruins of her grand debut. The war had moved from a cold, silent campaign to an open, albeit undeclared, conflict. In the weeks that followed, a new dynamic settled over our home. Mark was tense, watchful. He treated me with a cautious kindness that was entirely foreign. He'd bring me small gifts, a first edition book, a bottle of rare perfume. He was testing the waters, trying to gauge how much I knew, how much I would tolerate. He was also, I knew, trying to assuage his own guilt. I accepted his offerings with grace, playing the part of the slightly distant but ultimately forgiving wife. I was a placid lake on the surface, but underneath, the currents were churning. I began my true work. I started helping him. Darling, you look so overwhelmed with the Atherton project. I'd say, bringing him a cup of tea in his home office. Why don't you let me help you organize some of the preliminary research? I have a good eye for detail. He was hesitant at first, but the appeal of an unpaid, highly intelligent assistant was too much to resist. He handed over files, schematics, and client briefs. He gave me access to his servers. It was like handing a master forger the keys to the mint. Amber, I learned, was in charge of sourcing the signature art and design elements for the proposed hotel lobby. It was her chance to make a name for herself. Her concept was bold, modern, and centered around a massive, sculptural installation by a rising star in the art world. Mark was ecstatic about it. She's got a great eye, he'd said once, a comment that cost him a week of my icy silence. I spent my days in a quiet flurry of activity. I'd call old contacts from my museum days, chat with gallery owners, and have long lunches with art critics. I spoke of the Atherton project in glowing terms, praising the architectural vision, and then I would casually mention the interior design. Yes, a young woman named Amber Hayes is handling it. I'd say to a friend who wrote for Architectural Digest. Very enthusiastic. She has some interesting ideas, a bit derivative of Navarro's early work, perhaps, but with a commercial flair. You know how it is. Just a seed. A tiny, well-placed seed of doubt. To Lena, I was more direct. We sat in her serene, minimalist office, a place where I was no longer Mrs. Vance, but just Ellie. You're playing with fire, she warned, her brow furrowed with concern. This isn't healthy. You're becoming obsessed. Just leave him. Ellie. Take him for everything he's worth and build your own life. He took my life. Lena. I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. He took my career. My youth. My trust. A check from a divorce lawyer won't give me that back. This is not about money. It's about justice. It's about showing him, and her, who they're dealing with. They see me as a relic. I'm going to show them I'm a monument. Lena sighed, recognizing the iron will in my eyes. So, what's your next move? General, the Athertons are hosting a private dinner for the finalists next month. Mark and Amber will be there, presenting their final design concept. I need to make sure that presentation self-destructs. My plan began to form. Intricate and precise. I learned through my research that Mrs. Atherton, the true decision-maker of the couple, was a passionate collector of pre-Columbian artifacts. She valued history, authenticity, and legacy above all else. Amber's ultra-modern, almost sterile design was a direct contradiction to everything Mrs. Atherton held dear. But Mark, in his arrogance, was focused only on impressing Mr. Atherton, a man who loved anything new and shiny. I found my weapon. It was an artist, a brilliant but reclusive sculptor named Julian Croft. I had curated one of his first shows years ago. His work was deeply spiritual, drawing on ancient forms and natural materials. He despised the commercial art world and rarely showed his work. More importantly, I knew a secret about him a few years prior. A young, ambitious designer had stolen one of his lesser-known concepts and passed it off as her own. The experience had made him bitter and fiercely protective of his intellectual property. I made a call. Julian. It's Eleanor Vance. It's been a long time. 2 weeks later, Mark and Amber were preparing for the Atherton dinner. I watched them from the periphery, a ghost in my own home. They spread blueprints across the dining room table, their heads bent close together. They were a team. The sight of it was a dull ache in my chest, but I pushed it down. Emotion was a liability I could not afford. Ellie, could you give us some space? We're on a deadline. Mark said, not unkindly, but with a clear message: you are not a part of this. Of course. Darling, I said with a smile. It all looks very impressive. I'm sure you'll win them over. As I turned to leave, I accidentally knocked a stack of papers off the edge of the table. Oh, goodness. I am so sorry, I exclaimed, bending down to help gather the scattered pages. My eyes scanned them quickly. There it was, the centerpiece of their proposal. A grand, spiraling metal sculpture, sleek and futuristic, and undeniably, breathtakingly similar to one of Julian Croft's early, unpublished designs. Amber hadn't just been inspired by him. She had plagiarized him. She was either arrogant enough to think no one would notice, or foolish enough not to do her research. I suspected it was a bit of both. I stacked the papers neatly, my hands not betraying the adrenaline coursing through me. Here you are. No harm done. I smiled at Amber. Such a striking design. So original. She preened, basking in the compliment, completely unaware that I had just handed her the rope to hang herself. The night of the Atherton dinner, I helped Mark choose his cufflinks. We're the silver ones, I said. They project confidence. He looked at me, a flicker of the old affection in his eyes. Thanks, Elle. I don't know what I'd do without you. I know, I said quietly. While he was in the shower, I made my second call. This one was to an old friend, a journalist known for her integrity and her killer instinct. Clara, I said, I have a story for you, but you can't trace it back to me. It's about the Atherton project, Julian Croft, and a very ambitious young designer. I laid it all out for her. I didn't have to embellish. The truth was damning enough. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she said, this is good. Ellie, this is very good. I'll have it ready to publish online tomorrow morning. I hung up, my heart beating a steady, triumphant rhythm. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the spring. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the darkened living room, the moonlight painting silver stripes across the floor, and I waited. Mark came home long after midnight, buzzing with an energy I hadn't seen in years. He didn't notice me in the armchair as he moved through the hall, switching on a single lamp. You're still up, he said, startled. I couldn't sleep. How did it go? I asked, my voice calm and even. His face broke into a wide, triumphant grin. We nailed it. Ellie, We absolutely nailed it. The Athertons loved the concept. Mrs. Atherton was a little reserved, but her husband was blown away. He basically told me the contract is ours. Amber was brilliant. The sound of her name was like a needle to my skin. But I didn't flinch. That's wonderful news. Mark, I'm so happy for you. For us. For us. He corrected. Coming over to kiss the top of my head. The gesture felt hollow. An obligatory performance. This solidifies everything. The firm. Our future, everything. He was so blinded by his own success. He couldn't see the cliff edge just inches from his feet. He saw me as a spectator to his victory, not the architect of his impending defeat. You should get some rest, I said softly. You have a big day tomorrow. He nodded, already loosening his tie as he walked up the stairs. Biggest day of my life? The next morning, I was in the kitchen when his phone started ringing. It was 7 a.m. Far too early for a business call. He stumbled downstairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and answered it. Hello. What? I watched him as I slowly stirred my tea. The color drained from his face. His confident posture crumbled, his shoulders slumping as he sank onto a kitchen stool. No. That's impossible, a complete fabrication. Who is Julian Croft? He listened, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. I have to go. He hung up, his eyes wide with disbelief and panic. He stared at me, his gaze unfocused. Someone published an article online. Some art journal. It's accusing Amber of plagiarism. It's saying her entire concept for the Atherton project was stolen from some sculptor. I put my teacup down, arranging my face into a mask of concerned surprise. What? That can't be true. Who would do something like that? I don't know. He exploded, his voice echoing in the vast, silent kitchen. It's a smear campaign. It has to be. Amber is creative. She's original. He was trying to convince himself as much as me. I have to call her. I have to call Atherton's office before he sees this. He scrambled for his keys, his movements clumsy and panicked. As he rushed out the door, he didn't even say goodbye. The fallout was swift and brutal. By midday, the story had been picked up by larger news outlets. Clara had done her job well. The article was a masterpiece of journalistic assassination, complete with side-by-side images of Amber's design and Julian Croft's early work. The similarity was undeniable. Damning. Julian Croft, notoriously private, had even issued a rare public statement confirming the design was his, and that he was exploring his legal options. Mark's firm was thrown into chaos. Mr. Atherton, who valued his public image above all else, immediately withdrew his offer. The statement from his company was brief and cold, citing a need for partners who embody the highest standards of integrity and originality. The game-changing project was gone. Mark didn't come home that night, or the next. I knew he was with her, huddled in her trendy downtown apartment, the two of them trying to navigate the smoking crater that had once been their future. Their shared ambition had been the glue that held them together. Now, with that ambition thwarted, I knew the blame and recrimination would begin. I used the time to continue my work. I began meticulously reviewing our finances, a task Mark had gladly ceded to me years ago. I met with our wealth manager, a quiet, older man named Mr. Davies, who had always treated me with a gentle, paternal respect. Eleanor, it's good to see you, he said, ushering me into his wood-paneled office. How can I help you today? I'd like to begin restructuring some of our assets. Mr. Davies, I said, my tone calm and professional. Mark is looking to free up some capital for a new business venture, and he's asked me to handle the particulars. He's far too busy with the creative side of things. You know, it was a plausible lie. Mr. Davies nodded, completely accepting it. In his world, powerful men had wives who managed the domestic and financial details. It was the natural order of things. I want to move the contemporary art portfolio into a separate trust, I explained, pointing to a line item worth millions. And I think it's time we put the Willow Creek house into an irrevocable trust, for my future security. Mark agrees it's a prudent step to protect our primary residence from any potential business liabilities. I had spent weeks with a lawyer, drafting the documents. Mark's signature was on a power of attorney form he had signed years ago and long forgotten, giving me broad authority over our shared financial decisions. He had signed it with an indulgent smile, calling it housekeeping, never once imagining I would ever use it for anything more than paying the bills. His arrogance was my greatest asset. Mr. Davies reviewed the paperwork. Everything seems to be in perfect order. Eleanor. Mark is a lucky man to have such a shrewd and organized wife. I do my best, I said with a modest smile. When Mark finally came home, he looked like a ghost. He was thinner. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and defeat. The charismatic swagger was gone, replaced by a weary fragility. He found me in the garden, pruning the last of the autumn roses. It's over, he said, his voice flat. He didn't mean the project. He meant him and Amber. I snipped a dead bloom from a bush, not looking at him. What happened? She blames me. Says I didn't protect her. That I threw her under the bus to save the firm. I blame her. Her carelessness. Her ambition, it cost me everything. He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. We tore each other apart. Said things, it was ugly. Ellie. So damn ugly. He sank onto a stone bench, burying his face in his hands. I've lost everything. The biggest project of my career. My reputation is in tatters. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. For what? Absolution. Forgiveness? I'm so sorry. Ellie. I've been such a fool. Here it was. The moment of confession. The groveling. A part of me, the old me, felt the pang of pity. But the new me, the woman forged in the fire of his betrayal, felt nothing but a cold, hard satisfaction. Yes, I said quietly, setting my pruning shears down. You have. I sat down next to him on the bench, leaving a careful distance between us. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and dying leaves. I made a terrible mistake. He whispered. It was meaningless. She was meaningless. It was you all along. It's always been you. The words were a script he had probably rehearsed, but they were empty. He wasn't sorry for the affair. He was sorry he got caught. He was sorry he had failed. He was running back to the safety and comfort of the life he had tried to throw away. What do you want me to do, Mark? I asked, my voice genuinely curious. I want you to forgive me, he said, his voice cracking. I want us to go back to how things were. We can fix this. I can fix this. We just need to present a united front. We'll weather this storm together. Please, Ellie. I need you. I looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time in months. I saw not the brilliant architect, the star I had orbited for 2 decades, but a weak, frightened man, terrified of losing the comfortable scaffolding I had built around his life. I would not go back. But I would not leave. Not yet. The second act of my play was over. The stage was now set for the finale. All right, Mark, I said, placing my hand over his. His skin was cold. We'll face this together. He looked up, a wave of pathetic relief washing over his face. He believed it. He actually believed he was safe. He had no idea that I wasn't his harbor. I was a storm. My forgiveness was a poison, and he drank it down like a dying man in a dessert. In the weeks that followed, I became the perfect, supportive wife once more. I nursed his wounded ego. I fielded the sympathetic but secretly gloating calls from our friends. I told everyone who would listen that it was a tragic misunderstanding, a professional witch hunt against a talented young woman, and that Mark had been an unfortunate victim of the collateral damage. I played my part so convincingly that even Mark seemed to believe it. He clung to me, his gratitude sickeningly palpable. He was a ship taking on water, and I was his only lifeboat. The house, once a silent battleground, was now filled with his desperate attempts at reconciliation. He brought me flowers. He suggested weekend trips to Vermont. He sat through entire evenings asking about my day, feigning an interest that had been absent for a decade. It was a pathetic, transparent performance. Meanwhile, Amber had vanished. After a final, explosive fight with Mark, she cleared out her desk at the firm and disappeared from our social orbit. I heard whispers that she had moved back to Ohio to live with her parents. Her promising career in ruins. She had flown too close to the sun, and her wax wings had melted. I felt a sliver of something akin to pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold fire of my own resolve. She was a casualty of a war she had helped start. My true focus was the upcoming Vance Foundation annual charity gala. It was the crown jewel of the Willow Creek social season. And this year, it was more important than ever. It was our chance to publicly reassert our status, to present the image of a strong, united couple who had weathered a professional storm and emerged unscathed. Mark saw it as his opportunity for redemption. I saw it as my stage for his final public execution. It has to be perfect. Ellie, he said one evening, looking over the seating charts I was arranging in my office. We need to show everyone that we're fine, that we're stronger than ever. Don't worry, darling, I said, not looking up from my work. It will be a night no one will ever forget. I threw myself into the planning with a chilling fervor. Every detail was a carefully chosen weapon. The theme was Renaissance, a rebirth. The invitations were printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold leaf lettering. I selected a menu that was opulent, almost decadent. The flowers were cascades of white orchids and deep crimson roses, the colors of innocence and blood. My secret weapon, however, was my choice of beneficiary. Every year, the gala raised money for a different cause at the local hospital, an art museum, a children's literacy program. This year, I chose a new, little-known organization called the Artemis Project. Its mission was to provide legal and financial support to young women in the creative industries who were facing workplace exploitation, harassment, and intellectual property theft. When I presented the choice to the foundation's board, I framed it as a forward-thinking, timely cause. In light of recent events in the wider world, I'd said vaguely, it feels important to support the next generation of female talent and ensure their voices are protected. No one questioned it. They praised my insight and compassion. Mark, so wrapped up in his own self-pity, barely glanced at the proposal. He just signed where I told him to sign. A week before the gala, Lena came over. She found me in the ballroom, directing florists and lighting technicians. The room was already taking shape. A vision of dark, romantic splendor. My God, Ellie, she said, looking around in awe. This is a masterpiece, or a declaration of war. I can't decide which. Why can't it be both? I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. She pulled me aside, her expression serious. He's broken. Ellie, you've won. Isn't it time to stop? Just file the papers and walk away. He's not broken. Lena, he's just beaten. I said, my voice hard. There's a difference. Right now, he thinks he's going to recover. He thinks I'm his path back to the top. He sees me as his salvation. He needs to see me as his downfall. He needs to understand that this was not a storm he weathered. This was a demolition. And I was the one holding the detonator. And what about you? She asked gently. What happens to you after the dust settles? I looked around the grand ballroom, at the life I had so carefully built and was now so carefully destroying. I'll be free, I whispered. It was a truth so profound it almost startled me. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I was about to gain. The night of the gala arrived. The house was filled with the low hum of anticipation. Caterers moved with silent efficiency. Valets lined the long, sweeping driveway. I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down as the first guests arrived, their jewels and laughter sparkling in the grand foyer. Mark came to stand beside me. He was wearing the tuxedo I'd laid out for him, his charcoal gray tie perfectly knotted. This was a scene from my memory, the one that had haunted me for 6 months. He looked better than he had in weeks, a flicker of his old confidence returning. But underneath it, I could see the fear. He was watching me, his eyes filled with a desperate hope, praying that my performance tonight would save him. You look beautiful, Ellie, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that left my shoulders bare. It was a dress that radiated power and control. Thank you, Mark. You look ready. We descended the staircase together, a perfect couple, greeting our guests with warm smiles and practiced charm. We moved through the crowd, a king and queen reclaiming their court. I saw the Athertons holding court by the fireplace. Mark tensed, but I squeezed his arm gently. It's all right, I murmured. Tonight, we are untouchable. He believed me. He mingled. He laughed. He accepted the backslapping condolences for his recent troubles. He was rebuilding his world, one handshake at a time, convinced I was the architect of his reconstruction. After dinner, it was time for the speeches. The chairman of the board went first, thanking our generous donors. Then Mark took the stage. He gave a smooth, charming speech about the importance of community and philanthropy. He spoke of resilience, of bouncing back from adversity. It was a thinly veiled plea for his own professional resurrection. He finished by thanking his rock, his inspiration, his incredible wife, Eleanor. The room erupted in applause. He walked back to our table, his eyes shining with triumph. Then, it was my turn. I walked to the podium, the rustle of my velvet gown the only sound in the suddenly silent room. I adjusted the microphone, my gaze sweeping over the sea of expectant faces. I saw Mark, smiling proudly at me. I saw the Athertons, watching with polite interest. I saw all the people who had pitied me, judged me, underestimated me. Good evening, I began, my voice clear and steady. Thank you all for being here tonight to support such a worthy cause. Mark spoke of resilience, and he is right to do so. Resilience is a remarkable thing, but it is not enough to simply bounce back. True change, true progress, requires that we also create a world where such resilience is not so desperately needed. In the first place, I paused, letting the words sink in. That is why this year, the Vance Foundation is proud to support the Artemis Project. I explained the organization's mission, my voice ringing with passion and conviction. We must protect the bright, talented, and often vulnerable young women who enter our industries, full of dreams. We must shield them from the predators who would exploit their ambition, steal their ideas, and discard them when they are no longer useful. The air in the room grew thick, charged. Mark's smile had frozen on his face. He was beginning to understand. I continued, my gaze now fixed on him. I want to tell you a short story. It's a fable, of sorts. Once upon a time, there was a great, powerful wolf. He built a magnificent den and was admired by all the other animals in the forest. He had a partner, a she-wolf, who had helped him build this den, who had hunted by his side and guarded their legacy. But the wolf grew bored. His eyes fell upon a young lamb, who was ambitious and dazzling, and who promised him the thrill of a new chase. The room was utterly silent. You could hear a pin drop. People were staring at me, then at Mark, then back at me. His face was ashen. The wolf promised the lamb the world. I went on, my voice never faltering. He dangled the greenest pastures in front of her. But the wolf was careless, and the lamb, in her hunger, was reckless. They strayed too close to the territory of an old, sleeping lion, and their carelessness woke him. In the end, the lamb was devoured, her dreams turning to dust, and the wolf, his reputation shredded, came limping back to his den, expecting the she-wolf to lick his wounds and help him forget his folly. I let the silence hang for a long, painful moment. I looked directly at Mark. The moral of the story is this: when you build your house on a foundation of lies, do not be surprised when it collapses, and do not expect the woman you betrayed to be waiting in the rubble with a hammer and nails. Then, I turned to the stunned audience. To that end, to support those who have been wronged, I am personally pledging a $1 million donation to the Artemis Project. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the room. It was an astronomical sum. No one was looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at me with awe and a little bit of fear. They were looking at Mark with unconcealed contempt. His ruin was complete, and it had been delivered not with a scream, but with a story, right in the heart of the world he valued most. I stepped away from the podium, my heart beating not with anger or sadness, but with a profound, liberating calm. I had not raised my voice. I had not shed a tear. I had simply told the truth, and it had been enough to burn his world to the ground. The gala ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, mass exodus. People left in hushed groups, avoiding Mark's gaze as if he were a leper. The Athertons were among the first to leave. Mrs. Atherton giving me a long, considering look as she passed. A look that held not pity, but a surprising glint of respect. The air, once thick with perfume and champagne, now felt thin and cold, heavy with the weight of social execution. Mark remained at our table, a statue carved from ice. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stared at the centerpiece of crimson roses, his face a blank mask of shock. The staff began to clear the tables around us, the clinking of glasses and silverware sounding unnaturally loud in the cavernous room. I waited. I let the silence stretch until it was taut and humming with unspoken rage. Finally, he lifted his head, and his eyes met mine across the table. They were no longer the eyes of a confident, charming man. They were the eyes of a cornered animal. "How could you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, in front of everyone. "Our friends, our clients. You destroyed me." "Ellie." "No, Mark," I said, my voice calm and devoid of emotion. "You destroyed yourself. I merely read the eulogy. You wrote it. Word by word. With every lie, every secret meeting, every choice you made. It was a mistake. He hissed, slamming his fist on the table, making the glasses jump. A few remaining staff members turned to look. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It didn't have to end like this. You're right. I agreed. And he looked up. A flicker of hope in his eyes. It didn't. You could have been honest. You could have been decent. You could have respected our marriage, our history, enough to end it with dignity. But you didn't. You chose to be a coward. You tried to have everything. And in the end, that is why you are left with nothing. I stood up, smoothing the velvet of my gown. I'll be staying with Lena for a few days. I suggest you use the time to find a lawyer and a new place to live. Panic flared in his eyes, overriding the anger. A new place? What are you talking about? This is my house. Is it? I asked, a faint smile touching my lips. You should check with your accountant. You've been so busy with your projects. You seem to have lost track of the paperwork. I turned and walked away, leaving him sitting alone amidst the wreckage of his life. I didn't look back. The sound of a glass shattering against a wall followed me out into the cool night air, but it felt distant, like a sound from someone else's life. The next few days were a blur of legalities. Mark, spurred into action by my final comment, discovered the truth of our financial situation. He called me, screaming, his voice raw with impotent fury. He accused me of being a thief, a monster, a snake. I listened patiently on the other end of the line, sitting in Lena's quiet, sun-drenched living room with a cup of tea. When he had finally exhausted his rage, I spoke. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. Mark, I simply protected the assets that I helped build. For 20 years, my name was on the foundation. My time was spent on your clients. My energy was poured into your success. The law calls it marital property. I call it severance pay. He was left with his firm, which was now hemorrhaging clients and facing a potential lawsuit from Julian Croft. He had his reputation, which was now irrevocably tarnished. And he had his car. Everything else at the house. The art. The majority of our liquid assets was secured in trusts that he couldn't touch. I had stripped him of the armor of his wealth, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. A week later, I met him one last time at the house to supervise the removal of his personal belongings. It was a gray, drizzling day, the sky weeping over Willow Creek. The movers were quiet and efficient, loading boxes of his designer suits and expensive toys into a van. The house already felt empty, larger, breathing for the first time in years. He was a shadow of the man he had been. He looked older, defeated. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by a hollow resignation. He watched as his favorite Eames chair was carried out the door. I never thought, he began, his voice trailing off. I never thought you had it in you. Ellie. I was standing by the large picture window, looking out at the manicured lawn. Neither did you, I said quietly. That was your fatal mistake. You saw me as part of the decor, something beautiful and silent that made the room look better. You forgot I had a mind of my own. He finally looked at me, a genuine, painful question in his eyes. Did you ever love me? The question caught me off guard. I had to think about it. I searched inside myself, past the layers of anger and betrayal, back to the beginning, back to the ambitious young architect and the passionate young curator, who thought they could conquer the world. Yes, I said, and the truth of it was a faint, sad echo. I loved the man I thought you were, and I think, in your own way, you loved the woman you thought I was. The problem is, neither of us was ever really that person. He had no reply to that. He picked up his briefcase, the last of his things, and walked towards the door. He paused on the threshold, a ghost at the edge of his own life. Goodbye, Ellie. Goodbye, Mark. I watched him walk down the stone path to his car, a solitary figure under the gray sky. He didn't look back. As his car pulled away, I felt not triumph, not joy, not even satisfaction. I felt a profound and sudden lightness. It was the feeling of a heavy weight, one I hadn't even realized I was carrying for 2 decades, finally being lifted from my shoulders. The war was over, and I had survived. 6 months later, the world was a different color. The muted grays and sterile whites of my old life had been replaced with vibrant, chaotic hues. The Willow Creek house had been sold. The proceeds, along with the rest of my secured assets, had funded my new beginning. I was standing in a bright, airy space in Soho, The scent of fresh paint and sawdust still lingering in the air. Sunlight streamed through the massive industrial windows. This was mine. The Eleanor Vance Gallery. My name, not his, was etched in quiet, elegant letters on the glass door. Tonight was the opening reception. The gallery was filled with people. Their voices a happy, buzzing murmur. They weren't the stuffy, judgmental elite of Willow Creek. They were artists, critics, students, collectors, people who were here for the art, not the status. The inaugural exhibition was a showcase of young, female artists, the very people the Artemis Project was designed to support. Lena was by my side, a glass of champagne in her hand and a proud, beaming smile on her face. You did it, she said, squeezing my arm. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected, smiling back at her. Her unwavering support had been my anchor through the storm. So, are you happy? She asked, her therapist's eyes searching my face. I looked around the room, at the bold canvases, the intricate sculptures, the faces alive with passion and conversation. I thought of the quiet, serene woman who used to arrange flowers and seating charts, who measured her worth by the success of her husband. She felt like a character from a novel I'd read a long time ago. I wasn't her anymore. I didn't know exactly who I was yet, but I knew she was someone of my own making. I'm not the woman I was, I said. I'm not the wife, the victim, or the avenger. Those were just roles I had to play. Tonight I feel like Eleanor again. And Eleanor is not just happy. She's free. A young artist, who's powerful. Abstract painting was the centerpiece of the show. Came over to hug me, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude. As I hugged her back, I caught my reflection in the gallery's large glass door. I saw a woman I recognized. Her eyes were bright. Her smile was genuine. And she was standing firmly, irrevocably, on her own ground. The masterpiece I had been searching for all along was not on a canvas. It was me.